partners we have.
Okay, so I'll just stop there and just introduce us. Hi, I'm Joanna Romoliotis from CBC The National. Joining me, Detective Sergeant Nunziato Tramontozzi, the head of Toronto's Human Trafficking Unit, which is the largest unit of its kind in Canada, one of the largest in North America, in fact. Now, if you didn't watch the documentary that ran on Monday night or saw the piece, CBC.ca, about our piece on human trafficking, here's a bit of a refresher, and you're going to give us a little bit of a recap, if you will, right, about the problem. Can you just give us, just a start for people who didn't watch the piece, what is human trafficking and who are the victims?
Well, human trafficking really, in layman's terms, is the exploitation of what we see here in Toronto, young females being forced into the sex trade. And here in Toronto and even across Canada, this is at an epidemic proportion. So we were lucky enough here in the Toronto Police Service that we have a Chief of Police, Mark Saunders, that put the resources into helping these victims of human trafficking.
And why is this crime exploding across the country and in Toronto?
I think the biggest part of that is that it's so lucrative. Human trafficking is as lucrative or even more lucrative than drugs and guns combined. And you know, one trafficker can make $250,000 a year with one girl. And most of these traffickers don't just have one girl, they have 5, 10 girls in what they call a stable, right? And that's how they look at these girls, as animals, right? Yep. And that, I think, is the biggest part. It's so lucrative, and they know that these victims rarely come to court to testify against them.
So let's talk about the victims, because you talk about how the unit's priority and the focus is on the victims. Who are these girls?
Well, these girls mainly, what we've seen here in Toronto, range from the age of 14 to 17. There are older victims that we have. But the majority are in that range, 14 to 17. I can tell you that last year, 60% of our cases were females that were under the age of 16. So these victims come from all walks of life. This doesn't discriminate against anyone. Okay, girls do come from marginalized communities, but they also come from the other side of that coin, you know,
so-called good homes.
Very good homes.
Right.
You know, we've had victims that have parents who are doctors, you know, police officers, teachers. So it doesn't discriminate against any type of ethnicity. It's, you know, it's what they can find in that girl to manipulate her into doing what they want to do.
So how does that happen? How does this? You call it a grooming or luring process and a grooming process, and we can talk about how quickly that happens. But how does that? What does that look like? If you're a parent watching of a young teenage girl, what does that look like?
Well, it happens so seamlessly. These girls, you know, and it's not just girls. You know, it's everyone. They talk about their lives on social media. And these traffickers will look and troll the internet, and will see a girl who doesn't feel good about herself, right? And says that she doesn't feel good, she doesn't look good. And these guys pick up on that. They're master manipulators. And what they do is they say, oh, you know what? You look fine. I wish you were my girlfriend. And that's the hook. The hook is that they found that one vulnerability in that girl, and now they're going to exploit it, and they do a very good job at it, right? Mm-hmm. They shower these girls with gifts. They take them out to high-end restaurants. They let them travel and in their high-end vehicles, and once they've showered all these gifts on them, they say, "Sorry, but now you got to pay all that off because I'm not going to pay for that, and this is what you're going to do." And these girls want that life so bad with this person, they'll do anything for them at that point.
We have 3 questions now.
Okay.
The first one's Bridget. You can
Okay, we have 3 questions. I'm putting on my glasses, everyone, so I can read all these questions. Let's get to them. We are...
Bridget Mercier.
Bridget Mercier asks, what are they doing to curtail the demand side?
Well, here in Toronto, we do John Stings,
Okay.
and we actually did one with your documentary.
Right.
So we go out and we do John Stings where we pretend to be a female sex trade worker, and we put up ads on backpages.com because that's the one site that is used by all the traffickers, and then we have the conversation with the Johns, and once they come to the hotel, they're arrested and charged.
And we saw that too when we were with your detectives last week on that John Sting. They make it clear to whoever is reaching out to them that the person in the ad is actually underage.
That's
right?
correct, yes.
So why is that important to put that out there? Because
Well, you know what? Our mandate here in Toronto is really underage sex trafficking, and we want to make sure. We're not doing any kind of virtue testing here. Well, what we want to do is we want to get the person who wants to buy sex from an underage female, from an underage girl. Those are predators, and those are the people that we go after and arrest. So that's basically the reason why we do the underage thing.
because that's the mandate of the unit.
That's the mandate of the unit, right?
Right.
But yeah, John Stings, I can tell you, if we didn't have demand, we wouldn't have to have the supply. They're the problem. End of the story. Okay, the Johns are the problem here, and we are trying our best to do as many John Stings as we can. Unfortunately, we have limited resources too.
Right. Okay, let's go to the next question then. This one's from Andy de Medeiros, also asks, what support structures are in place for these victims? You also had a previous question. Hold on, Andy. I think you addressed it about how much money do these traffickers make from a girl. Why don't we start with that,
Okay.
because you might have missed it, and then talk about the support that's available for them.
So, as I said before, traffickers are making $250,000 on one girl. Okay.
That's a striking.
It's an incredible amount of money
Yeah.
that these traffickers are making. These traffickers are driving Ferraris, Maseratis, Bentleys, and none of this money is going to the victims. None of it.
That's a really good point, because a lot of people would have asked us, even in the course of putting this piece together, how is this different from prostitution?
Well, there's a big difference. Prostitution is a choice. Human trafficking isn't a choice. There's no choice. They're being exploited. They're being forced into the sex trade. Prostitution is a choice. If you are 18 years of age and above, and you want to be a sex trade worker, that is your right, and the police are not going to bother you. Okay? But if traffickers are forcing females into the sex trade to profit from them, that's the difference.
Right.
And we're going to go after those people.
And to pick up on Andy's thought about the support for these victims, what's out there? In a really general overview, because I know you can't go too deep into that, but what is out there for
Well,
them?
we're lucky here in the Toronto Police Services that we have 4 major partners that assist us with those wraparound services that these girls need to get back on their feet, to get healthier, and to go forward in their lives. We have Covenant House, we have Boost for Kids, we have East Metro Youth Services, we have Victim Services Toronto, and those 4 agencies help us immensely with these victims. When we started this unit, the problem we had was that we were drowning in victim management.
Right.
And so we needed something to help us with that victim management piece. So we were able to come together, form an alliance, and now we have a 24/7 model, emergency model. So even at 3 o'clock in the morning, if we get a victim that has come forward, we will deal with our end of the investigation, get a statement from her, and once that statement's done, we will call one of our partners, and either we will take the victim to them, or they'll come and pick her up, and then she gets the services she needs to help get back on her feet. A lot of girls that we deal with unfortunately have drug addictions,
Right.
have mental health issues, and they need that help to go forward. So that partnership is great for us because it helps us when court comes.
Right.
They will take that victim right from the start of the court process all the way through to the end. And that's an immense help for us.
Absolutely. So we'd like, we have a couple of questions here.
The first one from YouTube, PS.
PS from YouTube. Okay, I'm coming to you. PS from YouTube. And Nunz, maybe you can address them directly to
Okay.
camera too sometimes, but turn to me as well. I think people like to see to see your face when you're talking. What are the challenges of prosecuting the culprits? And that kind of just comes out of what you talked about. When these cases go to court, what are the challenges when it gets to actually nailing these people?
Well, the biggest challenge is having the victim come to court and testify. That is our biggest challenge. These traffickers, they know and they understand that they've manipulated these girls so badly, and they've put them through such a big trauma that there's a bond still between them.
Yeah, the trauma bond.
That trauma bond is huge, and that is the single most, the largest problem we have is having them come to court, first of all, and having them testify against this person that they love.
Right.
And that's what it is. It's very hard to think that a girl that's been traumatized, been told what to do, who to have sex with, when to eat, still loves their trafficker. And that is our biggest problem.
Right. Okay. So that speaking to that, then let's see. But that was PS and Sherry Thorne Bradshaw. She had a comment, not so much a question, but you can speak to that. You can talk to your kids all you want, she says. You can prepare them all you want. You can monitor them all you want. Predators are called predators for a reason. How do you respond to that?
I agree with her.
Yeah.
Right? But as parents, we have a job. And that one job, and the most important job, is to ensure that our kids are safe. Okay? And
how
yeah,
do you do that?
there are incidents where you can do everything there, but they fall through the cracks, unfortunately.
Is there something that you've noticed in all the cases that you've dealt with? They come from all walks of life, you say.
That's
but
right.
Is there a commonality amongst the victims that maybe you can give some advice to parents on how to potentially safeguard them?
I really think that they have to be in their kids' lives. They have to give them that unconditional love. They can't judge, right? And they have to have that open line of communication.
Right.
You know, that's how I and myself and my wife parent with our kids. We have that open line of communication. And yes, there are predators there. They will do everything they can to hook these people, these girls, into the game. But I think as parents, no matter if you think that, well, it doesn't really matter because they're going to get them anyways, that's not the mindset you should have. The mindset you should have here is that you have to be a parent, have to be in their lives, you have to know what they're doing on social media, okay? And those rules have to be followed in the household.
Well, let's go to Christian Corriveau, who is asking from YouTube as well. I think you addressed this, but maybe Christian wasn't tuned in at that time. Do Johns really go looking on the streets? Isn't there more sophisticated ways that these people are interacting?
So the Johns that we deal with now, back in the 80s, 90s, when I was a uniformed police officer, there were prostitution tracks here in the city. Those they no longer exist. Now, all the sex trade work is over the internet. And it's all on backpages.com that we deal with. So they become more sophisticated in how they do their business. And it's a lot harder to investigate because they're not on that street corner any longer. But we've been very successful in doing our operations and doing our John stings to help in this cause.
Okay. And now I'm going to, Futternet, I'll get to you in one sec, but I'm going to jump, because it's related to what we just addressed, to a question from Renee Dawn Millward. She comments, I'm concerned that this isn't addressing the fact that traffickers have been known to target youth homeless shelters or LGBTQ populations. Grateful that you're addressing the growing epidemic of online trafficking, but my concern is that part of the population that isn't living and breathing the subject may be misled as to how these victims are also targeted. And she's making the point that they do hang out in person to find these people, not just troll on them online. And you have addressed that, right? I mean, I think schools you talk about, amusement parks. Like, how does that happen? They just show up and just start showing off a fancy car and get girls to come and talk to them?
Well, they bump into them.
Right.
You know, I'll give you a perfect example. You know, girls that will go to a mall together, and these traffickers know that that's where they congregate. That's where they are. And they troll the malls, and they bump into them, and they start talking to them, start joking around with them. Hey, can I have your number? That's how it starts. It's just a friendship thing. It's like, hey, I want to get to know you. And then at that point, once they get that number, that's when they start manipulating. That's how they do things, right?
You talk about that too, which is interesting, because these pimps or traffickers are very close in age to the victims,
Yes.
right? So it's not like a middle-aged man approaching a young girl, and on the surface already it seems off.
That's right.
That
These
friendship element is because they're kind of similar, right?
They're kids also.
Right.
You know, we have traffickers, and they range from the age of 17 to 25, 30, but they talk the same way, they do the same things, they listen to the same music.
Right.
So all that is an element that assists them in getting in with the group.
Right. So let's go back to Futternut from YouTube asks, and you address this again, but again, let's reiterate for people who haven't tuned in. Is there an increase in the trade, and are the stats constant across Canada, or is, say, Toronto a different world than Calgary?
No, I think that this epidemic is throughout all of Canada. And you know what, and we have stats here that, you know, in the past 3.5, 4 years that I've been here, we've had over 750 occurrences of human trafficking.
Right.
You know, we've dealt with 204 victims.
Is it higher in Toronto, though, too, just simply because of the population base is
I
higher?
I would think so,
Right.
that it would be higher, but this problem it spans right across Canada. Okay, and a lot of our victims are transported from Toronto to other provinces just because they're being isolated from friends and family.
To keep the control over them.
So yeah, so this problem is not just a Toronto problem, it goes right across Canada.
So going back to the parent issue, obviously we have some parents tuning in. Lucy Lopez, Eric Houghton, they both have comments that are similar, so maybe you can address them both. You have to talk to your kids over and over again, Lucy says. We have to remind ourselves that these days are dangerous for our kids. And Eric comments also, even the thought of monitoring your kids' online activities and maybe someone to talk to rather than the person who just doles out punishment. So maybe there's somebody out there who can help guide young people who have, you know, questions about this. So just basically, maybe you can speak to the importance of keeping the lines of communication open as a parent and maybe any other community group out there.
Yeah, you know what? I think we need to have those tough conversations with our kids. You know, both my kids understand what human trafficking is, what the signs are, so that if it happens to them, they can realize what's happening, and they can go and talk to either myself or my wife, or to the police, or to teachers, wherever they are situated, right? So I think that line of communication has to be there, and we have to keep on telling our kids that there is a problem here, that we need to make sure that you're safe, and this is the way you can be safe. So that tough conversation has to be with your kids. You can't allow them to live in a bubble, because there are dangers out there. If we can educate our kids, I think we're giving them the best tool possible to fight against getting into the game.
To even know when it might be happening, right? To even see it coming.
Because a lot of these kids don't understand it is happening.
Right.
They think it's a loving relationship, but there are signs there that can trigger something that will save their lives.
What are the warning signs, since we're speaking to parents about the whole communication, and then we'll jump to a couple more questions that deal with the legalities and the challenges prosecuting these cases. But speaking to the point about the warning signs, and what should parents be on the lookout for?
Well, you know what? There's a lot of warning signs. And if you just have one of these warning signs, it doesn't mean that it's human trafficking. But if you see 4 or 5 of these warning signs, that's time to start investigating. So, you know, if your daughter's drawn back now from being the person that she always is, her grades are falling, she has a boyfriend that doesn't want to meet the parents, you see her getting picked up in a car that is out of the income bracket of a boy that's supposed to be 17, 18 years of age. You know, these are signs that you got to look into, and like I said before, not one is indicative of human trafficking, but if you have 4 or 5 of them, I seriously think you have to start investigating and have to start asking questions to make sure that they're not getting into the game.
And you get a lot of calls from parents, right? This unit does.
Yes, we get calls daily from parents asking for help because their daughters have now fallen into the game, or asking, listen, I've heard about human trafficking, I've seen some of the signs, but I want to ask you your opinion on what we should do. And we are more than willing to help out the public. You can call our office, and one of the investigators on my team here will speak with any parent that needs help.
Okay.
10 questions.
Yeah, so, I know this is a really popular topic. So there's a few here, so I'll ask all 3 of them, from Manny Fernandez, Bobby Hunt. Let's talk about, they're both raising the questions about the challenges of these young victims going to court. First off, what are the court sentences like for human trafficking? Are they getting convictions in Canada? And Bobby Hunt, that was a question from Manny Fernandez, and Bobby Hunt also asks, don't they, I'm presuming the victims, get death threats from the person who's trafficking them? What happens when the traffickers threaten? Because that must be incredibly scary if they're already under people's control and then they're trying to break out. Like, how scary must that be? And then once they get to court, to speak to Manny's question, what are the chances of this person being convicted?
Well, you know, one of the ploys that traffickers use is threatening the girl, threatening their family.
Wow.
That's how they control the girl. What I can say is that we have been successful enough to get those services for these girls, and to put in those safety plans that we do for all our victims, to ensure that they're safe, their families are safe. It is an enormous job, but so far it's worked for us. And to the sentencing part, I can tell you that the new laws for human trafficking came into effect in 2005, and when I started this unit up in 2014, Toronto had 1 conviction for human trafficking,
And
just
now?
1.
Wow.
And now since we've restructured this unit, since the resources have been put into this unit, and we've done our investigations, we're up to about 30 human trafficking convictions. Our biggest sentence that we have for human trafficking is in 13 years. We're getting sentences now between the range of 8 to 12 years.
Okay.
Sorry to interrupt, but this is a little off topic, but I think I should ask it because it's right out directly on our Facebook page. Any advice for those, from Paula Bali, any advice for those of us who are missing a daughter who are desperately searching for her? Is there any advice you can give her for what to do?
You know, keep on fighting to find your daughter. Don't give up. Engage the police services that you're living in, and you know, make sure that you do everything and anything that you can to try to find your daughter.
Don't
Sorry,
give
I
up.
just thought that was very important.
Well, it speaks to
You know
exactly
what, really,
they're talking.
and what you just said, never give up. You know, I can tell you as a parent, I would never give up. I would do everything and anything in my power to make sure that I would find my missing daughter.
And eventually, the girls who get trapped into this world, most of them, do they get out after a certain amount of time? Because speaking to her question, maybe she can't connect with her daughter now, but on average, when do they start to reemerge or resurface?
You know what? A lot of these victims that we've seen, they only come forward when they've hit rock bottom, right? When either they think that they're going to die, or that they're going to get seriously hurt from the pimp. So that's when we really get involved with these victims. It's very hard for them to get out of the game because for years this is all they know, and you know, these traffickers use certain things, you know, drug addiction, to control them, and to get out of that game, to get out of the drug use is hard. That's why they need those wraparound services to help get back on their feet, to get to be a healthy person again and move forward with life.
Okay. A couple more questions relating to access to devices. Well, I'll just address one from Random Reviews. How old are these girls? We know that the average age, according to your statistic, is about 17.
Yeah, it's
14 to 17?
Yeah, we see them between 14 and 17 here in Toronto.
And 60% of the unit's victims are under 16 years old.
That's
so
what we
they're
saw
young.
last year.
Okay, so the majority of the victims are quite young. Amanda Dunsmore asks, should parents be limiting access to devices such as cell phones? And if so, what is the age where we should relax those rules? It sounds like a very individual parental question, but if you can address that briefly.
It is an individual parental question. You know, I'll give you the advice that I follow. You know, I have teenage kids. They have phones, they have computers, and I know the password to each device. That is a rule in our house that has to be followed. If they don't want to give us their passwords, then I take their devices away.
Okay.
You know what? There are things that my parents did when I was young that I didn't like, but were for my good. And I parent the same way. You know what? There's too many dangers out on the internet, and it's my responsibility to make sure, and my wife's responsibility to make sure that they're safe, and there has to be rules to internet access and what they can do.
Okay. Tanya Furlan and Jane Doe from YouTube both ask about the role of hotels and motels, where the majority of these crimes are taking place. What message do you have for them? And if they are aware, are there, I guess there's a suggestion in one of these questions that if they're complicit, have you come across motels and hotels, for example, that are aware and complicit, and what's your message to them?
Well, my message to Tanya is that human trafficking is in every hotel here in Toronto. You know, our investigations have led us to almost every hotel here in Toronto, in the Greater Toronto area. This is happening just down the street from here in a hotel in Toronto. I can actually take you there and can point out who the human traffickers are. It's that prevalent. And what we need is a huge buy-in from our hotels to help us in first of all educating their staff on the signs of human trafficking, but also, you know, getting on board and having a unified voice, right? Saying that in our hotels, we're not going to allow this to happen. If we can get that from our whole hotel industry, I think we'll be in a good spot. You know, human traffickers need hotels to conduct their business. And we need the hotel industry, hotel chains, to, you know, really to do the right thing. We need to assist these victims of human trafficking. And if we can get that buy-in from these hotel chains and start up a campaign to try to end human trafficking hotels, I think we'll go a far way.
Lucy Lopez just quickly also asks about that. Is training for transportation drivers for these signs important as well? That's a really good point because these girls are in cabs or
You
on
know
buses.
what? That's a great question because the cab industry is a big part of this.
Right.
The cab industry, Uber, you know, we have to engage those industries to assist us in these kind of investigations. You know, the days of just working in your own silos is over. We need those partnerships.
Okay.
We need the community engaged to help us with this problem.
You use the word epidemic. Rhonda Gray is asking, and you addressed this earlier, but address it again, please, because people, obviously it's an important one. What do you attribute the increase to the problem, Rhonda asks, that it has reached epidemic proportions?
Well, as I said before, Rhonda, the human trafficking here in Toronto and across the world, it's very lucrative. This is all about money. It's about money and power, and they're making enormous amounts of money on these girls, right? One, like I said before, one trafficker will make $250,000 for a human trafficker. So that is, I think, one of the biggest reasons. Another reason is that victims don't come to court, and they know it. Traffickers know that 99% of the girls that they traffic will never testify against them.
That's what Paul Salvatore was asking about, the challenges of prosecuting these culprits. It's not necessarily in the police work, it's getting these witnesses to testify.
That's correct, right?
Okay.
And you know what? We've actually been pretty successful lately in getting pleas from human traffickers. We're doing everything and anything to corroborate the victim's statement so that we don't have to bring her to court. Right? That there's so much evidence in front of the courts that the traffickers now think, well, you know what, I better get the best deal I can, because if I don't, I'm going to jail for a long time.
Okay. And now, who was this now? Futternet, sorry, back to Futternet from YouTube, because we forgot about, we skipped over this. Are there difficulties working with other police agencies across Canada and internationally?
No, we have a great relationship with all our law enforcement partners and security agencies here in Toronto, across the province, nationally, internationally. You know, we had a case that just we did a release for yesterday, and you know, most of our cases are domestic. This was an international human trafficking case, and we were lucky enough to have great partnerships that were instrumental in our success in arresting the two people that were trafficking women that were being advertised in Portugal for employment in Toronto. So we partnered up with the federal police in Portugal that assisted us. We had the Canadian Border Services help us out with our investigation. We had FinTrack, who, because of the Project Protect initiative that they have assisted us in following that money trail with this investigation. That intelligence that we get from you know, Project Protect and FinTrack, that Canadian agency, is instrumental in corroborating what victims tell us in their statements.
We have a few more questions, and we'll get Kathy Curry. I know you're asking about red flags and warning signs for parents, and we'll recap with that because I know a lot of parents have that on top of their mind. But there is the question about the pimps. If we can go back to the traffickers themselves, Jen Nye asks, do traffickers work alone or part of a larger gang? And maybe if you can give us a brief overview, is there a typical trafficker or pimp in these cases?
I don't know if there's a typical pimp or trafficker. You know, I could say that, you know, 50-60% of the traffickers that we've arrested have gang affiliations, but it's not like a hierarchy structure of any sort. It's, you know, three guys in a street gang. Well, you know what? We're going to run these girls. That's our thing. Or, you know, another three in the same gang. Oh, yeah, we're going to have this here. We're going to do it. So it's not very structured in that sense. But they are involved in human trafficking in Toronto, and we have seen it. We have a lot of you know, what we call one-offs. You know, guys that see how lucrative human trafficking is, and they start their own little business.
Wow. So yeah, they're just taking advantage of the demand out there.
That's correct.
Yeah, and how easy this seems to be. So going back to the warning signs. So Angela Dubois and Kathy Curry. Kathy Curry comments, a list of red flags and warning signs available to parents would be very helpful. Or keywords to listen for in our conversations with them that would help us pay more attention. So could we address that again? Because again, that is such a huge issue for parents out there.
Yeah, so there are a lot of, you know, there are signs that you should look out for. You know, when your daughter really, you know, withdraws from the person she used to be. You know, if she was bubbly and happy and now she's withdrawn and doesn't want to come out of her room, is very secretive about what she's doing, very secretive about what she's doing on the internet. Those are signs. If her grades drop, you know, if she has a boyfriend, she's told you about the boyfriend, but she won't bring her home. Bring the boyfriend home, right? Those are indications. You know, if she's being picked up in a car that's way out of the income of a 17-year-old, 18-year-old boy.
And
right?
presents too, if she's showered with expensive gifts.
And that's another thing, you know, where you see new clothing that she has, or jewelry, or purse, or any of those items that are expensive, first of all, to purchase, and are way out of her income bracket. Those are indications. And I said before, if it's just one of these signs, okay, that might not indicate human trafficking. But if you see 4 or 5 of these signs, you need to speak to your daughter, and you need to find out what's going on.
And you can call the police, because you did
Yes.
make that point earlier. Because
Yes.
Angela Dubois asks that, what do you do when possible human trafficking is happening? What do you do?
What I tell you to do is you call the police service that you live in, and advise them of the situation, and they will have officers come and speak with yourselves or with your daughter. Here in Toronto, if you suspect that your daughter is being trafficked, I encourage you to call us, and we will speak with you, and we will speak with your daughter if that's what you would like, and we will find out what is going on.
Okay. I think it's important to reiterate about the difference between prostitution and human trafficking, because there's another comment coming up talking about if you're going to make it legal and regulate it, then this kind of thing won't happen.
Well, and I have to be very clear about this, okay? And that's what there is a problem out there that people think that prostitution is legal, and you know, leave them alone. They should be able to do what they want to do. I agree that if you are of the age of 18 and above, and you want to be in the sex trade, that is your right. The police are not going to bother you. There's no, you haven't committed any criminal offense. But that comes down to choice. You're choosing to enter the sex trade. What my team deals with is people that have no choice, that are forced to have sex with 15 and 20 men a night. That is the difference. Okay, so we need to understand the biggest part of human trafficking is that the victims have no choice whatsoever when they're forced into the sex trade.
And they're not reaping, if there were any benefits, monetary benefits, because they're not getting, and in some cases when we were interviewing your team for part of the documentary that was on the National, it struck me too that they talked about how they not only control what you just talked about, who they see, how many sex acts they have to perform, but even if they get a meal.
Yes.
And that was striking to me. Like, why even to that extent? It just sounded so primitive.
Well, they're controlled in every aspect of their lives. They're you know, and I said this before, they're told when they can sleep, when they can have sex, what sex acts they have to do. You know, when they can go to the washroom, okay? That's the control that these traffickers have over these girls. So, you know, these girls are being traumatized on a daily basis, and they're using every method to control them.
I think we're going to be wrapping up with questions soon. Does this also happen? Okay, I'm just going to do a quick three. In terms of foreign, I think two people have addressed this, and this was coming from Belinda Fernandez, and just recently now from Catherine Fraser as well, and Ari Lemon, talking about how it might happen to young boys and might also happen to newcomers to Canada who have that vulnerability as well in terms of the language and just not knowing their place, but also because they are targeted, right, from foreign countries. So you talked about the case in Portugal.
Yes.
Where young women, they were responding to ads for receptionists.
That's
and
right.
they get here, and then what happens?
And then, you know, in this particular case, when the victim came to Toronto, they were told that there was no job available because it was filled. And then they say, well, we have another job, and this was in a massage parlor, and all you have to do is have give massages to men. And then, you know, they slowly say, well, you know, if you give them a little extra, you make more money. And that's the process until it's, you know, full-blown sex that they're having with these Johns. But the problem with them is that these victims don't have anybody to rely on except for those traffickers, right? Their families are back in, you know, in this case in Portugal. They're threatened. Their families are threatened. So, and they're told that what they're doing here in Toronto is illegal, right? So
There's no real way to go.
Who do they turn to? They're not going to turn to the police because they think that they're committing a criminal act.
Right. And we'll wrap it up on this last question. I mean, just to pick up on that thought, the majority of victims that you deal with are Canadian girls, because people do have that misperception that this just happens with people who are not from this country. So that was a pretty striking one. And just to wrap it up on this last question from Jen Noy, how can someone report a trafficker or a pimp?
What they can do here in Toronto is that they can either call our police line at 416-808-2222, and they'll have an officer come to their address, and we'll take a report on human trafficking and their pimp or the trafficker. They can actually call Crime Stoppers if they want to do it anonymously, and those Crime Stoppers tips come directly to me in this unit. They can actually call us here at Sex Crimes. The number is 416-808-7474, and they can ask to speak to the human trafficking investigators, and we will speak to them and get their information.
Okay, well, thank you so much. Detective Sergeant Nunziato Tramontozzi from Toronto Police's Human Trafficking Unit. I'm Joanna Rumoliotis with CBC The National. Thank you so much for joining in. We had so many questions, so clearly this is a topic that it really resonates with people out there. Thanks again for joining us.